Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're going to try to wrap our heads around aging and mortality.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It is. And to help us out, you've provided some really interesting stuff to look at.
Yeah, we've got some Atul Gawande
Right. Excerpts from his book, Being Mortal.
and some Bronnie Ware.
From her book, Top 5 Regrets of the Dying.
Yeah.
So surgeon's perspective and a palliative care nurse. Kind of a fascinating combination, right?
Absolutely. Two very different views on the same, well, ultimately the same experience.
Exactly. We're going to see what they both have to say about how we approach, well, I guess life and death and all that's in between. And maybe find some surprising insights, maybe some things that can help us live better.
For sure. I mean, you've got Gawande kind of wrestling with the limits of what medicine can actually do.
Yeah.
And then Ware hearing those incredibly personal reflections from people who are, right there at the end of their lives.
Yeah. It's heavy stuff, but also so important. And I don't know about you, but just reading these excerpts, it's already got me thinking in a different way. Like one of the first things Gawande says is, and I'm going to quote him here, "There's no escaping the tragedy of life, which is that we are all aging from the day we are born."
Whoa. Yeah, he doesn't sugarcoat it, does he?
Not at all. Kind of a punch in the gut, right? But also, like, so true. It's this reality that we all try to ignore.
Especially these days.
Right. Like, our whole culture is obsessed with staying young.
Yeah.
But he's forcing us to confront it head on. And then what I found really interesting is how he puts this into historical context.
Oh, right. Yeah, he talks about how we used to care for the elderly.
Yeah. Like, it used to be that multi-generational households were just, like, the norm.
Yeah, totally. Like grandparents living with their kids and grandkids.
Exactly. He even uses Emily Dickinson as an example. This, like, famous poet.
Right. I love her poems.
Back in the 19th century, she was right there caring for her aging parents. It was just life. And now it's different. It's like we've outsourced aging.
He has a name for it, right? It's
He calls it intimacy at a distance.
Yes. That's
like we've moved away from those integrated family units. And it's not just an American thing.
Yeah, he talks about how it's happening all over Europe, Asia.
Yeah. It's becoming less common for elderly parents to live with their children. So then the question is, what does that mean for us now? I mean, we're living longer than ever thanks to all the medical advancements.
Right, but those extra years often come with more. Well, frailty.
And dependence.
Exactly. So it's like we're delaying the inevitable, but what about the quality of those extra years?
That's the big question. And Gawande points out that all that medical progress, it hasn't actually changed the trajectory of decline.
That's a good point.
We're kind of postponing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little and talk about the biology of aging. Gawande has this one detail in the book that just, like, blew my mind. He says, experts can gauge a person's age to within 5 years from the examination of a single tooth.
What? Really? Just from one tooth?
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? It's like there's this hidden timeline etched into our very bones, whether we want to see it or not.
It really makes you think about, like, all those little aches and pains we start to feel as we get older,
Right. Is it just like wear and tear, or is it like something more?
And then there's the whole question of genetics. Gawande says it only plays a small role in how long we live.
Right, like something like 3%, according to some research.
Yes.
Which is kind of surprising.
So it's not just all predetermined?
Apparently not. He compares the body to like a complex system.
Yeah.
That eventually, wears down.
Like a wind-up toy?
Exactly. He uses that analogy. It's from a biogerontologist named Leonid Gavrilov. But the winding down, it's not all dictated by our DNA. There's lifestyle, environment, even just plain luck. So how do we navigate that winding down? How do we define what good care even means for the elderly, especially when so much of modern medicine focuses on fixing those acute problems?
Yeah, it's not so much about those subtle complexities of just getting older.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where geriatrics comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a whole field of medicine focused on, like, quality of life for older adults.
Right. And he mentions a study from the University of Minnesota. They found that geriatric care can significantly reduce disability, depression, and even the need for home health services for high-risk elderly folks. So it seems like it's actually effective.
It is. But then there's this weird paradox.
What do you mean?
Well, geriatrics is, like, underfunded, often undervalued even. And it kind of reflects a societal bias, Like, we're obsessed with youth and we're uncomfortable with aging. It's like we're extending lifespans.
But we haven't really figured out how to support people in those later years.
Yeah. And I know this is for the listener now, but But think about how much we're bombarded with messages about staying young, battling aging, like it's some kind of enemy.
Right, but what if accepting aging as a natural process was actually more liberating?
That's interesting.
Instead of chasing after this impossible ideal of agelessness, maybe the key is to shift our focus to creating a life that has meaning and purpose at every stage,
Yeah,
even as our bodies change.
absolutely. And I think that's where Bronnie Ware's work comes in.
Right. She's the one who identified those 5 common regrets of the dying.
And it's amazing how few of them are about like material success or career achievements.
Right.
They're about like relationships,
Mhm.
authenticity, and just happiness.
Okay, I definitely want to hear more about these regrets. Okay, so tell me more about these regrets. How does Ware present them?
Well, she actually lists them out, all phrased as "I wish" statements, which I thought was really powerful.
Oh yeah, you can really feel the longing in that.
Absolutely. So much left unsaid.
Okay, so what's the first one?
The first one is, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me.
Wow. Yeah, that's deep. It makes you think about all the pressures to conform.
Totally. Like, we follow these paths that society lays out for us, even when they don't feel right.
Exactly. And that regret, it suggests that we do have choices.
Wow.
Might not always feel like it, but we do. What's the next one?
This one's, well, it's a bit of a tough one, especially these days. I wish I hadn't worked so hard.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that one hits home. We live in this crazy hustle culture, always pushing, always striving.
And it makes you wonder, what are we sacrificing along the way?
Right, our health, our relationships, our own well-being.
Exactly. This regret, it's a reminder to prioritize what truly matters. It's about finding that balance, you know? Work is important, but it's not everything.
Yeah, for sure. Like we get so caught up in the doing, we forget about the being.
Oh.
Okay, what about the third regret?
Okay, this one always gets me. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings.
Oh man. Yeah, holding back, bottling things up. It's something so many of us do.
Because we're afraid of being vulnerable, of causing conflict. But think about all those unspoken words, all those emotions we keep hidden. They can create so much distance.
And regret. It's like we're saying that true connection requires authenticity, even if it means having those tough conversations. Okay, what's the next one?
This one's a reminder of the importance of relationships. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends.
It's so easy to let those friendships slip away, especially as life gets busy. But this regret, it suggests that those bonds are worth holding on to.
Absolutely. Friendships, they ground us, they give us a sense of belonging, they offer support and understanding through all of life's ups and downs.
Yeah, those connections are precious. We can't take them for granted.
And the last one, the one that maybe resonates the most deeply, I wish I'd let myself be happier.
Oh, wow. That's heavy. Like we had the capacity for happiness all along, but somehow we missed it.
It's almost like a self-recrimination, isn't it? But it also suggests that happiness is a choice. It's a way of being in the world. And it's available to us right here, right now.
But we get so caught up in negativity, in self-doubt, in comparing ourselves to others, we forget to appreciate the simple joys.
Exactly. So these 5 regrets, they really paint a picture of how our priorities shift as we age. It's like all the things we thought were so important, they start to fade into the background. And what emerges are those core human needs for connection, meaning, and just a sense of peace.
That's really interesting. And it's fascinating how much Ware's observations align with the work of Laura Carstensen.
Right. She's the one who developed the socio-emotional selectivity theory.
Remind me what that is again.
Basically, it says that as our sense of time becomes more limited, we naturally shift our focus towards those meaningful connections, those experiences that bring us joy.
It's like we become more discerning about how we spend our time and energy. We're not chasing after novelty or achievement as much. We're more interested in emotional well-being.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing what truly matters in the grand scheme of things. And what's really cool about Carstensen, she had this near-death experience when she was younger, a car accident. And she talks about how that experience shaped her research.
It makes sense, right? Like when
Yeah.
you're suddenly confronted with your own mortality, it changes your perspective.
It makes those everyday worries seem so much smaller. And it makes those connections with loved ones seem so much more precious.
So it sounds like Carstensen's theory suggests that this shift in priorities, it's not just about getting older. It's about how much time we perceive we have left.
Right. It's about that awareness of our own finitude. And it raises some really important questions, like how do we create a life worth living even in the face of decline and dependence? Because that's the reality for a lot of people as they age.
It's a big question. But I'm curious, did Carstensen actually do any studies to test out this idea that our priorities shift as we age?
Oh, absolutely. She did a really interesting study where she compared healthy individuals to those with terminal illnesses. And what she found was, regardless of age, the people who were facing a limited lifespan, they placed a higher value on things like emotional well-being and close relationships.
It's like that awareness of mortality amplified their appreciation for the things that really matter.
Exactly. And it makes me think about Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich. You know that story.
Vaguely. Remind me.
It's about this wealthy, successful guy, Ivan Ilyich. He's got everything, but then he gets sick. And as his health deteriorates, he realizes that none of his accomplishments or possessions really matter. The only thing that brings him comfort is human connection.
Right. And there's that character, Gerasim, his servant. He's the one who shows Ivan Ilyich true compassion.
Exactly. While everyone else is kind of awkward and uncomfortable around Ivan Ilyич's illness, Gerasim just treats him like a human being. He takes care of his physical needs, of course, but he also offers genuine companionship and understanding.
It's such a powerful reminder that sometimes the most meaningful care comes from the most unexpected sources.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder, how can we create a society, a healthcare system, that prioritizes this kind of compassionate care, not just for those who are nearing the end of life, but for everyone facing dependence and vulnerability?
That's a great question. And thankfully, Gawande actually explores some really inspiring models of care in being mortal. Like he talks about this woman named Karen Wilson, who was a pioneer in the assisted living movement. Assisted living. I always thought of those places as, well, kind of depressing, where people go to fade away.
Right. But Wilson's approach was radically different. She wanted to create environments that empowered elderly individuals, where they could maintain their independence and control over their own lives, even as they needed help with daily tasks.
Okay, so it wasn't just about being cared for, it was about having agency, making choices.
Exactly. And Gawande also talks about Bill Thomas, who brought about this really cool concept called the Eden Alternative. He actually introduced things like animals and plants, even chickens, into nursing homes.
Wait, chickens? In a nursing home?
I know, right? It sounds crazy. But Thomas found that these enriched environments, they really helped residents feel more connected, more engaged. It was about creating a sense of community, a feeling of home.
So it wasn't just about providing care, it was about creating a life worth living.
Exactly. And Gawanda also visited some really innovative facilities like the Leonard Florence Center for Living and Sanborn Place. These places, they really challenge that conventional wisdom of safety at all costs. Like at Sanborn Place, residents are allowed to walk even though there's a risk of falling. They can make unhealthy food choices. They can even have overnight guests.
Wow, that's amazing. It sounds like they're actually treating residents like adults, like people who are capable of making their own decisions.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that a life worth living sometimes involves embracing a certain level of risk. And it goes back to those 5 regrets. People want to feel like they have agency, like they're still in charge of their own lives, even when they need support.
And that desire doesn't just disappear because we get older, right?
Mhm.
I mean, think about that regret of not living a life true to oneself. That speaks to a very deep human need.
Absolutely. And these innovative models of care, they're not just about physical well-being, they're about creating environments where people can thrive, where they can find purpose and meaning even in later life. Which brings us back to Bronnie Ware and those regrets.
Because at the end of the day, it's not just about adding years to life, it's about adding life to years.
Right, exactly. And as Carstenson's research shows, that desire for connection, for meaning, for a sense of legacy, it actually intensifies as we become more aware of our own limited time.
So it's not just about how we care for the elderly, it's about how we live our lives now. Because the choices we make today, they shape the life we'll look back on, whether that's 5 years from now, 50 years from now.
Yeah, it's like you said, it really makes you think about what you want your story to be. When you look back, what do you want to see? For me, reading those regrets, especially the one about not expressing feelings openly, that one really, really got to me.
Yeah, it's easy to hold back, you know.
It is. Out of fear, pride, whatever. It makes it hard to say things like, I love you, or I'm sorry, or even just like, I appreciate you.
It's true. We don't always realize how powerful those words can be, especially when we're faced with how fragile life really is.
Exactly. And reading Ware's book, it makes you wonder how many of us are carrying around all those unspoken words, creating distance and regret when when what we really want is connection.
Right. And Gawande, he talks about the importance of having these honest conversations, especially when it comes to end-of-life wishes. Oh, yeah, he shares that story about his own family, caring for his father who had that spinal tumor, and how tough those conversations were.
It's so hard to talk about death and dying, especially with the people we love.
It is. But Gawande, it makes a really good case for why it's so important. It's not about, dictating choices. It's about understanding what matters most to the person who's facing those difficult decisions.
Yeah, like what are their goals, their fears?
Right. What trade-offs are they willing to make? And he says just asking those questions can be incredibly freeing.
It brings clarity, more control even.
Yeah. And ultimately, more peace of mind for everyone involved.
Exactly. And it helps ensure that the care we provide, whether we're family members or, healthcare professionals, that it actually honors the person's wishes. Because sometimes we think we know what's best, but we haven't really asked.
Right. We might be acting out of love. But if we haven't had those honest conversations, we could be, making choices that don't align with what the person truly wants.
Yeah.
And Gawande makes it clear that these aren't just conversations for the elderly or people who are terminally ill. They're for all of us, no matter our age or health status.
Absolutely. Life is unpredictable. And having those conversations, even if they're hard, it can save so much heartache and regret down the road. It's about, taking ownership, making sure our voices are heard.
So it sounds like we've covered a lot today.
We have aging, mortality, and all the choices in between.
Right. So after hearing all of this, I guess the question for a listener is, what small change could you make today to align your life more closely with what truly matters to you?
Yeah, it could be something as simple as reaching out to a friend you haven't spoken to in a while, or telling someone you love them, or even just, taking a step towards a dream you've been putting off.
It doesn't have to be some big grand gesture. Even a small shift in intention can make a difference.
Totally. Yeah. Or, maybe just take a few minutes to think about your own priorities. Ask yourself, what do I want my story to be?
Because ultimately, life is a collection of choices. In each moment, it's precious. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive.
We did. And for anyone who wants to explore these ideas further, we highly recommend checking out the full books by Gawande and Ware, Being Mortal and The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying.
So much wisdom packed into those pages.
So much.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, life is a journey.
It is.
And it's up to each of us to choose how we want to navigate it. Choose wisely, choose bravely, and choose to live a life that's full of purpose, connection, and joy.